Ambassador Power, thank you for joining us today for this Voice of America interview. We appreciate your time. In your remarks to the Council on Monday, you called for international mediation and dispatching international observers to Ukraine. And today, Special Envoy Robert Sari was stopped by armed men in Crimea and had to end his mission there. How this will affect the UN plans to send observers to the region?
Well, let's just first state the obvious, which is that for days now, Ukrainians in the Crimea have been subjected to intimidation and threats, very much along the lines that Mr. Sari faced today on his visit. And this harassment and this intimidation is unacceptable, and it is why the international community has expressed its outrage and grave concern over developments in the Ukraine. In terms of how this affects the larger picture, I mean, we are heartened, I suppose you'd say, that the OSCE has managed already to dispatch several dozen monitors. I know that they're going to try to get out to the eastern part of Ukraine and to try to get to Crimea as well. The Deputy Secretary General is departing Ukraine, but the Secretary General, the UN Secretary General, says that he's intent on continuing his mediation role. And I don't think the developments in Crimea today with Mr. Sari are going to affect that. The issue is not what the international community is willing to do. The issue is whether Russia is prepared to de-escalate and embrace mediation and monitors as a way out of this terrible crisis.
So if the situation does not de-escalate, what could be the next steps of UN Security Council or UN General Assembly?
Well, I think what we're focused on, again, is this off-ramp, is the monitoring presence, getting as many people out to eastern Ukraine and into Crimea as possible. The Russians have made a series of claims that we find baseless, that we have no evidence of. But our point to the Russians is, if you have these claims and you're saying to the international community that certain things happen, what are you afraid of? Why not allow monitors in on a large scale in order to offer assurance that ethnic Russians and so forth will be protected? And again, that we have been rebuffed up to this point, but we're still pushing that, and that many of the steps that the international community has taken, including calling emergency sessions of the Security Council, are aimed at creating venues where Russia hears from the broader international community about the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and unity of Ukraine, on the one hand, and of the widespread support for these de-escalatory steps. In the event that Russia does not take the off-ramp, what I can speak to is certainly what the United States is prepared to do. We are taking steps already to deepen the political and economic isolation that Russia will find itself subjected to, in addition to canceling preparations for the G8 meeting in Sochi. We have also canceled, as you know, military engagements, as well as trade and other forms of economic bilateral cooperation. A lot of those engagements that had been on the books are going to be pulled down, and we're looking at targeted sanctions that might be put in place against those that we deem responsible for this act of aggression.
Ambassador, are there any compromises that are being discussed in negotiations with Russia regarding Crimea and Ukraine in general?
I think that ultimately the future of Ukraine is, needless to say, for the people of Ukraine to decide. It's not going to be dictated by outside forces. The challenge so far is that Russia is not itself really proving willing at a high level to engage the Ukrainian authorities directly or to accept the mediation that has been offered by a whole host of international actors. So again, from the Ukrainian perspective, at least as we've heard it, there is a great desire for dialogue at a very high level. Ukraine has reached out repeatedly to Moscow at all levels, in all sectors: defense, economy, acting head of state to head of state, etc. And so far with no return. So while compromise over time may be in the cards, ultimately that's up to the Ukrainian people. But it's really, really important that Russia takes the hand that's been extended and engages peacefully rather than through military means, or this could escalate in a hurry.
It sounds like the world is united in condemning Russia's intervention in Ukraine. From your perspective, does Russia have any allies at all?
I can't really speak to that. What I can speak to is the overwhelming force of opinion that has been expressed in every venue, whether it's the OSCE in Vienna or the UN Security Council here, or just even in the halls of the United Nations. I think people feel as though we're in a time warp of sorts, and people are, all the memories of 1968 and 1956 are floating through the halls here, and there's just an overwhelming twofold message. One, that the world community stands behind the Ukrainian people and the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and unity of the Ukrainian state. And two, that Russia must not pursue military solution to the issues that it has raised, but rather should engage with monitors, with mediators, and others to work through this period and to get us all to the elections that have been scheduled for May 25th, in which Ukrainian people, whether ethnic Russian or not, all will get to express their views and their voices in a much more traditional and peaceful way.
And probably the last question to you, Ambassador. Do you know if NATO is considering any response to Russia moves?
Well, as you know, Poland called for a NATO consultation under Article 4, which is quite an unusual move. I think what you're seeing across the region is great nervousness on the part of countries that were once fell behind the Iron Curtain and are very concerned about what Mr. Putin's military moves presage for the broader region. So we are engaged in those consultations. Our emphasis as the United States certainly is on political and economic isolation, again, if Russia continues on the path that it has chosen thus far.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.